What is oud fragrance? Given the subjectivity of scent and its nomenclature, in this video I lay out the facts of what exactly is oud fragrance and exhibit the differences between designer oud perfumes, natural oud, and artisanal oud oil. Oud as a note can be found for as little as $1 a gram, yet artisanal oud can cost as much as $1,700. That's a huge discrepancy. So what's the difference, and is it worth it? In a nutshell, designer fragrances labeled oud mostly use synthetic aroma chemicals produced by flavor and fragrance manufacturers like Firmenich and Givaudan. As for those that claim to use real oud, that is what has come to be known as pure and natural oud in the market, which is produced in plantations. But neither come close to the satisfying depth and complexity experienced within fine artisanal oud, which can exhibit up to 150 different aromatic compounds within a single oil. But there's more to it than just that. Continue watching to learn the details. This exotic and mysterious aromatic substance has a legendary history and has been renowned in the regions of the Middle and Far East for centuries. Yet the developed Western nations and modern perfumery has only relatively recently come to know of the valuable aromatic, unfortunately in the waning of its existence. Agarwood oil is known by many names, with perhaps the most common being oud, O-U-D. Spelling variations of the same word exist, and some of the more common ones are A-O-U-D and O-U-D-H. The variations are mostly for the sake of novelty, meaning they're the brand's way of distinguishing themselves from the thousands of other oud fragrances that have flooded the market, although some argue these spellings to be more accurate transliterations of the original Arabic word. In Arabic it's spelled Ain, Waw, Dal, with the Ain having a slightly guttural pronunciation, Oud. So one could perhaps see where the A comes from. However, the Dal at the end of the word is pronounced D, as in the word end. So the H doesn't really make sense, in English anyways, but that's just semantics. Oud is also known as eagle's wood, aloes wood, agar wood, gaharu, and by many other regional terms. But in the original sense, it refers to Aquilaria and Gyronops genera of the Thymoleaceae family of trees, only found in regions of the India and the Far East. There are also other more common aromatic woods that some dilute and confuse agar wood oil with, but more on that later. Availability. Given the huge industry, agarwood has been synthesized into aroma chemicals and is also now widely cultivated in plantations covering hectares of the Far East. However, the olfactory profiles produced from the plantations commercially are a faint echo of the great history of wild oud. Given the complex and desirable effects wild oud imparts on perfume, perfumers and designers have been searching for an affordable alternative. But the oud aroma chemicals fail to exhibit the complex profiles and characteristics of the legendary substance and to convey the degree of satisfaction. So they're turning to the remnants of its existence, the plantation-grown oud, known as pure oud or natural oud. The legacy is not lost on the commercial industry, and eager to capitalize on the great history, perfumers and brands reference legendary regions of oud such as oud from Laos. However, these once great regions are now far from legendary. Covered in monoculture plantations, they produce generic oud that bears little resemblance to the wild oud that put the country on the map. With an increasing number of plantations, finding natural oud oil is not difficult. Hence the many dealers, aka vendors, popping up all over the place. But finding exceptional oud oil is a different story. In fact, these days it's next to impossible to get a hold of. The highest quality artisanal oud oil was produced from wild trees that had been left to naturally mature, undisturbed by mankind in pristine terroir for decades. The resin formed, layer upon layer, deeper and deeper into the trees, adding to its depth and complexity, transforming from Ken to Sea, and perhaps even to Kinam, the highest grade of oud. I'll be putting out a detailed video on raw agarwood, the grades and their differences soon, So if you haven't already, subscribe now to be sure to see it. Until the turn of the century, the wild agarwood trade was a civil affair. Then, with a big bang, wild sources were wiped off the map by profit-driven campaigns to obtain as much of the material as possible, as quickly as possible. Given the gold rush, the individuals in the jungles known as hunters disregarded that only 7 out of every 100 wild Aquilaria trees actually contained any oud resin and cut down every tree found, almost completely depleting the wild reserves, with most of the valuable raw material ending up in the Chinese market, and that which remains standing under close governmental regulations and monitoring, with many prohibitions implemented. Formation and development. One of the most phenomenal aspects to oud is its formation, because of the miraculous circumstances surrounding its development in the wild. The aromatic resin forms as a repair to the damaged tree, with the rarest wild trees ultimately perishing from the extent of the infection or trauma, and as if to give one more time in their death, the tree yields the most valuable aromatic in the world, oud. Artisanal oud articulates the full story, accurately expressing and honoring the true essence and history of the oud's formation, literally transforming the tree's history, aromatic resin, into a spirit through the alchemical process of distillation. The pure and natural oud nowadays tells a far different story. Hectares of jungle are cleared for monoculture plantations which undergo a far different process, with some of these so-called plantations more resembling hospitals or factories, with IV bags literally hanging from the trees, or large syringes injected into the trees, dripping lab-concocted inoculate into hormone-boosted saplings riddled with nail and drill holes, with most cut down at no more than 10 to 15 years old, and some at a mere 5 years of resin development. This is the sad truth of natural oud behind the scenes. The resulting resin formation yields oils with shallow, linear profiles, which the industry peddles as natural. The uniform, reproducible, generic profile perfectly conforms to designer and pseudo-niche perfume house uses. These pure and natural oils are also what most vendors on the proverbial streets of the internet deal on the corner. The oils have just enough oud to make you want more, but are far from the satisfying depths and replete, enriching profiles of genuine artisanal oud oil. To meet the growing demands, large firms like Givaudan and Firmenich produce synthetic aroma chemicals such as Black Agar Givco and Oud Synthetic 10760E. One whiff of these will reveal the oud ingredient within many mainstream oud fragrances, yet these aroma chemicals each only portray a single profile from the range exhibited by natural oud, and barely scratch the surface of artisanal oud profiles. Synthetic oud often exhibits cedarwood-like and leathery notes, with the worst of them resembling, well, let's just say the least pleasant origin of indole, perhaps an attempt to replicate the oud mass-produced in India with its fecal fermented profile. Half a liter of these aroma chemicals can be readily purchased for little over $500, about $1 a gram. Consequently, the market for agarwood essential oil has become tainted by the spread of synthetic products being sold as oud, or oud perfume, and oud eau de toilette, while in fact they hardly ever contain any actual oud oil, only its price tag. Oud the note. Because of its value in perfumery and its expansive worldwide demand, the perfume industry has flooded the market with synthetic oud aroma chemicals, watering down and convoluting the legacy of oud with their shallow and linear plantation ouds. To be blunt, most brands starting to use the term are just milking the cash cow that is the growing trend and vast market of wealthy Arab and Middle Eastern nations, given their affinity towards everything oud, and nothing to do with the appreciation of the fine aromatic. The use of oud as a term has never been more widespread, nor has the quality ever been so low. For commercial purposes, oud is any ratio of the lowest grade agarwood oil in combination with any other oil, be it of natural or synthetic origin. Some commonly used natural adulterates include the white portion of the Aquilaria tree, vetiver, nagarmartha, and crocodile wood. Crocodile wood most often refers to a member of the Thameliaceae family of Aetizolan genus, rather than the Aquilaria genus, and the tree produces visually impressive wood, often carved and fraudulently sold as agarwood online, and the shavings from which are commonly used in oud distillations to boost the yield, but dilute the profile. The term bueya is also widely used as slang by the hunters for any number of woods which can be used at the distilleries as diluents. Commercially, the note could be any combination of dioctophthalate, also known as DOP, in conjunction with other $1 synthetics. So while most oud available are combinations of synthetics or watered-down plantation oud, notable producers like Ensar Oud offer vintage oud oils. Oud distilled many years ago in trademark fashion from a grade of agarwood now literally impossible to get a hold of, which was then left to naturally age and mature like fine wine in a cellar. But finding premium grade agarwood is only half the story. A great deal of fantastically good oud wood has also been wasted due to poor distillation procedures. An orchestra, after all, composed by a do-it-yourselfer, is not quite the same as Mozart. Artisanal oud. Rather than synthetic one-note wonders, when produced at the hands of a master composer, a single oud oil can possess complexities and depth that surpass most designer fragrances on the market. Psychoactive is one way to describe artisanal oud oil. Mind-blowing is another. A perfumer's guilty pleasure, artisanal oud oil is without a doubt the most valued and refined olfactory merchandise available anywhere. Distillation of such an oil is an art form in its own right. Producing high-end agarwood oil today is all but a thing of the past, because we no longer have ready access to the quality of raw agarwood that established its legendary status. However, the unheard-of distillation techniques and rigid standards of purity ensures that the agarwood oils you get from reputable artisanal oud producer Ensar Oud are a very different product compared to the natural ouds and commercial ouds so widely available from the many street vendors, the overnight artisans and armchair distillers who take advantage of the niche arduously pioneered by the man who brought oud to the West, and the unsuspecting fragrance lovers new to oud who are unaware of the differences. These impostors frame their oud as artisanal when they're as original as the framed Polaroid of the Mona Lisa. Established at the turn of the century as Oricent LLC, and now known as Ensar Oud, his intimate involvement and hands-on, on-the-ground quality control ensures genuine incense-grade agarwood is used in the production of the artisanal agarwood oils, not the alternatives, which every honest distiller will admit to adding to the pots, because nowadays, diluting is an industry-wide standard. This degree of quality is too expensive for most perfumers and distributors to implement on a large scale, which is why the small batches of exquisite quality Ensar Oud oils sell out in short order. Have a look at what Ensar Oud derives their raw materials from. Now have a look at what most oil-grade agarwood from plantations look like. Yep, that's right. White wood and all is ground up and thrown into the pots, boosting yields, but diluting the aromatic quality in the process, making their oils even more shallow. You see, only the resin of the tree in various stages of development is aromatic, yet the white wood will still produce oil, boosting the yields, but diluting the aroma. Another yield-boosting technique commonly used by commercial distilleries, greatly impacting the aromatic quality of the oud oil, is lengthy pre-distillation soaks. This is also where the misconception that all oud has a barnyard and fecal smell comes from. The distillers soak the ground-up agarwood dust in water, sometimes for months, without changing it. anaerobic fermentation begins, and the wood becomes completely saturated and begins to break down. The saturated wood yields more oil when distilled, but the aroma of that oil is as funky as you would expect from what is literally rotting wood. And this process is largely the reason oud has gained the reputation of smelling offensive or foul, because that oud actually is, but that is not artisanal oud. Oud of Indian, Cambodian, and Laotian origins are most widely known for those unpleasant fermented profiles, yet the same oud in the hands of an artisan can elicit aromas with a depth and complexity that surpasses many fragrances on the market, with perfect balance and seamless transitions. The possible tweaks which can elicit unusual notes are endless. Artists can hypothetically distill Assamese oud, renowned for its animalic smell, as well as Cambodian, Thai, and Bornean oils to exhibit the most flamboyant, bright scent profile. But here is where the unique aesthetic of the artisan must come into the picture, take a firm grip on the reins, and direct his journey of olfactory discovery through inventiveness and creativity in the direction that he feels is right, imparting his signature into the oud oils. There is a golden mean which raw materials, distillation techniques, and all the know-how and expertise of the artisan can aim to attain in his craft. The scent which the oud wood gives off when gently heated, the oleoresin of the wood. After all, the smoke of the burning oud chips is the epitome of oud, parfume at its best, and well-crafted artisanal oud oil gives you that aroma for hours on end. Of course, there are many grades of agarwood quality, with Chiara or Quinam and sinking grade wood being the most sought-after types, and I'll get to the differences between Chiara and Quinam in a later video. But in short, its status as the pinnacle of oud makes Chiara the most coveted incense in the world, which is why oricent ouds that capture its unearthly scent command the highest prices of $1,700 plus per gram. But after the raw material is procured, then the real nitty-gritty of artisanal oud distillation begins. For example, the mineral content of the water you use during distillation has a spectacular effect on the oil. Distill an Indian oil in Evian drinking water, and rather than the fermented profile standard for Assam, you might just end up with a sweet gourmand as delicious as honey. And Ensar Oud has long since done exactly that, eliciting easy-to-wear profiles from regions responsible for that stinky oud stigma so widely spread. Oud oils from Assam, Meghalaya, Haflong, Burma, Manipur, and Bhutan, which are aging with floral, sumptuous, and elegant profiles, with absolutely zero stank to them. But water is only one out of a dozen factors. The material the pot for cooking is made of plays a major role, as does the method of soaking. What the containers you soak the oud in are made of matters too, as do the ducts inside the boilers. And don't forget the condenser. You might distill 100-year-old Bhutanese raw material in copper with zero soak and get a rosy oud oil. Yet if you soak them for 2 weeks and cook in steel, the oil will smell more like champaca and tuberose. You might soak in Evian for a week and cook in groundwater, or soak in groundwater for a month and cook in Evian. You might soak in Evian for 2 weeks, then re-soak in groundwater for another 2 weeks, or groundwater for a week followed by a 3-week Evian soak. You might soak in plastic or in clay or in ceramic. You might cook in copper or stainless steel or in glass. The variables are many, and the ways you can combine them are virtually endless. As with any art medium, there are also certain fundamental constants, such as the region of origin and genus of the material. Cambodia, India, also known as Hind, comprised of several East Indian countries, and Thailand are perhaps the most internationally renowned origins, although agarwood also grows in Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Myanmar, China, Vietnam, Laos, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Commercially, broad categories of scent are assigned to the regional variations. India is animalic, Cambodia fruity, and Thai oud sweet. These general profiles of natural oud are what the flavor and fragrance conglomerates have replicated, and for the most parts, these scent categories are where the differences in commercial ouds end. Yet, just like their fruit-bearing counterparts, agarwood trees produce radically different types of resin, and therefore smells. To the same degree that snake fruit can be said to resemble durian, Indian oud oil resembles Cambodian, and Bornean resembles Papuan. They are all oud to the same extent that papayas, dragon fruit, lychee, kiwi, and oranges are all fruits. But that is where the similarity ends. All further comparisons, whether in chemical makeup, olfactory profile, method of inoculation, peak maturation, fermentability, and optimal extraction techniques, hold as much water as similar comparisons would between different fruit-bearing trees. The best way to harvest mangosteen bears no relevance to harvesting watermelons, and the optimal extraction method for orange juice is of little relevance to mulberries. When distilled artisanally, purposefully, and in much smaller, higher quality batches, each oil becomes a unique fragrance, fabulously complex with up to 150 aromatic compounds within a single artisanal oud oil. While commercial ouds have to be blended to be of interest, artisanal ouds can be worn neat as a standalone fragrance. Ensar Oud harnesses the genus, variances interior, and the length of development of the resin, using the right combination of equipment, temperature, and water to elicit replete nuanced profiles, harmonizing all of the variables, capturing vast vertical and horizontal complexities, giving you a heavenly luxury scent. Artisanal oud is so much more than a single note. It's a symphony orchestra with as many nuances as there are pitches of sound. And just as a composer harmonizes the sounds of the instruments, the producer harmonizes the distillation variables to elicit the profile he envisioned. Conclusion. For the big fragrance houses, oud is merely a scent category, a buzzword fittingly tied to the oil dollar, the dinar. Synthetic ouds are now openly mixed into oud oils of long-established agarwood distributors in the Arabian Gulf, and are widely used in most mainstream oud fragrances. Natural oud as an aromatic is little better, with its main purpose to replace the synthetics in perfume, which fail to exhibit the real smell of oud and its characteristics, and to appeal to the developing wellness lifestyle market with its natural label, of course omitting the hectares of jungle that were felled in the process, and the factory conditions of the plantations. Oud earned its status from wild sources, and as an aromatic, the upper echelon of artisanal oud oils exhibit a degree of depth and vertical intensity unsurpassed by any single aromatic, and a horizontal complexity, the scent development or evolution, that rivals and in many cases surpasses even the most niche fragrance. Authentic wild oud sources now are almost non-existent, and most of what remains isn't found on the market, but deep in the vaults of private collectors and estates. The oud of legend earned its status through its haunting aroma and intrinsic soul-stirring attributes, once only available to prophets, emperors, sultans, and kings. A few traces remain, passing through the hands of passionate and eccentric artisanal oud producers, and into the hands of the equally rare individual who appreciates an art for its detail, the brilliance of each stroke, and the subtle, nuanced hues. When investing in an oud olfactory work of art, support the known reputable producers. As with any rare commodity, the imposters and plagiarists outnumber the authentic sources. Thank you everyone for your time. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more upcoming information.